Hi, everybody, and welcome to TechWhirl's Fast 5 discussions, and thank you for joining us for today's show. My name's Al Martine, and today we're talking about publishing content on the web. To be specific, publishing great technical content online. To help us explore this mysterious world is Dan Beal, Nikki Blyle, and Shawnee Mahler from Doc2Help. And as always, helping me moderate our discussion and ask the questions will be my partner and editor of TechWhirl, Connie Giordano. Jill Parman's helping us take some of the notes that are on the public link to Google Docs. You can find that on the page you're watching this on. So we thank her for paying attention and taking notes as well. So before we start answering everybody's questions, let's meet everybody the folks from Doc2Help. Dan Beal, until very recently, he was the product manager for Doc2Help, but is now, or is still kind of that, we'll ask him in a minute, but is now responsible for general marketing and the positioning of Component One's portfolio of products. He's a 15-year veteran of the software industry with experience in web development, technical writing, marketing, and product management. Also with us, Nikki Blyle. She's the lead information developer for Doc2Help and has 20 years of experience in the software industry. She's designing, developing information products for documentation, media, industrial, automation, simulation, and pharmaceutical industries. From what I gather, basically anything that we touch at any given point in the day, Nikki's helped to write some information about it. She's a Doc2Help team member for about 8 years. She manages and develops the entire documentation set for the product and also does various types of communications. Her hobby is skydiving while president of the STC. She had originally shared, we do all these backgrounds, and she said that this was her hobby and she enjoyed doing those things, but she also wanted, but with her time as president of the Society for Technical Communication, this has been a bit limited. We'll dive into that as well. Shawnee Mahler is our newest member of the Doc2Help team. She's currently the associate product manager and is working with Dan to come up to speed and will later take his role on completely. Prior to joining the team, Shawnee worked for Sherpa, a software development company, where she was responsible for technical support, managing customer implementations, contributing to the software development process, and the tech docs. Shawnee also worked on the training team for CERT-CC, where she helped develop content for various IT-related courses. And also, as mentioned, our editor, Connie Giordano. Welcome to everybody on the show. Thank you so much for joining us. So, yeah, this is where you say, thanks. We interact.
Thanks, we're happy to be here. I thought there was going to be more coming out.
No, that's about it. So, one of the things we do want to do before we get into the discussion is take a moment to mention that Doc2Help has been a longtime friend of TechWhirl. They're an underwriter for our email discussion list and our community forums. For everybody who's watching this and participating, we encourage you to check out their great current product, Doc2Help, as well as their new product that we're going to be talking about later today, Nest. Dan, before we go any farther, I'm sure I didn't give it justice. Can you give the elevator pitch for Doc2Help?
Well, it's just, it'll make everybody's life easier. That's all anybody needs to know.
Nice.
No. I'm kidding.
No, but I was going for, but nice.
No, basically, if you write Word, or if you like to write in a built-in editor with HTML, Doc2Help accepts Word or HTML source, and then manages the project for you and creates any output you need. So you can basically take your source content, if you already have it, or author new source content, and produce manuals, Microsoft help files, web-based help files that we call NetHelp, so we'll probably talk about that here and there. NetHelp equals web help. And also content for mobile devices, PDF, EPUB, basically anything you need and DocTel will manage the formatting and content mapping for all those outputs. So that's the 10-second tour.
Very nice, cool. So, what we were talking about as we kind of prepped for this was that you're actually moving into a new role with Component One.
Yep.
How's the transition going? Can you talk a little bit about how that's going?
Well, I feel like I have 2 jobs, but it's getting better. So, you can't just turn the switch and walk away from DocTel. I mean, I've been the product manager for 10 years, so that's why we brought Shawnee on as an associate. So she's working closely with me, and I'm slowly transferring my duties to her. And sometime near the end of the year, it'll all go to her. But at this point, I'm spending half my time managing DocTel and half the time managing everything else Component One does, which is a lot of stuff for developers.
Gotcha. And has this affected any of your leisure activities? Any boating problems here? Is that gotten in the way of any of those things?
No, I just installed a laptop on my boat, so we'll be fine.
Fantastic. A little sat nav, and there you go. You're just coding right there out on the water. So very cool.
In this day and age, we all work 24/7 with phones, with email in our pocket, and everything else. So it's fine.
Very nice. So, Nikki, doing anything interesting this month?
Yeah, the summit's coming up in Phoenix. I'll be leaving next week. We have a couple of board meetings before what I always like to say company comes. Everybody arrives Sunday for Leadership Day in the opening session. So so the summit Phoenix is coming up. You guys said when we were getting ready that you're not going to be there because of other commitments, and that's a bummer. We always look forward to seeing you there. But if anyone who's on the in the Hangout is coming to the summit, I look forward to seeing you there. We have lots of exciting things planned.
And where would people find more information if by some chance they suddenly wanted to go?
Summit.stc.org.
Cool. Yeah, so we've been there a number of years, and it's quite a good time. We wish we could be there this year. So, and finally, our new shiny penny, who's brand new. Shawnee, welcome aboard, and wanted to say, find out how the role's going. How has been the experience?
Good. Everything's been great. I have a lot to learn, but Dan and Nikki and everyone else at Component One have been great. They've been teaching me a lot. So it's just a matter of time before I learn all that I need to know and still more, I guess.
That's it. Well, welcome aboard. We're glad to meet you and look forward to seeing you at the various conferences and stuff. Connie, how are you today?
I'm doing good. It's I've been watching some of the conversations that have been happening on the list, and big debates going on between using DITA and using Wiki and the future of TechCom and all sorts of wonderful things. So it's been interesting to observe what's been happening and occasionally throw in an opinion or two.
Very nice. Yeah, definitely. So I've seen a lot of volume, a lot of folks having a lot of conversations on our lists and stuff. So that's good. That's very good. All right. So let's get on to why we all got together today, which is we call these Fast Fives because we generally find around 5 questions and then another 20 sub-questions to them to ask on a topic. And today it's about web content and specifically how to make online technical communication content, tech docs more engaging and how to do it very well. So Connie and I will moderate, ask these questions that we've already written. You can see those on the Google Doc that we've shared. But also, if by some chance you're following along and you do have a question you want to ask our experts, use Twitter. Use the hashtag TWFast5, the 5's a numeral, and we'll track those and throw them in from time to time. Once this is done, it will be saved and it will be available on TechWhirl, as well as we'll do a quick write-up. And some of the questions we don't get to, then we'll do a write-up and cover those, or just reach out to the people who ask them directly. So we have many questions, so let's go ahead and jump in. Connie, do you want to go ahead and start the questions?
Sure enough. Okay, so to really get this thing going, I guess one of the things that makes a lot of sense is to sort of get a definition here. So I don't know who wants to answer this first, but I'll give all three of you guys a chance to answer, or folks, I shouldn't say guys, to answer this about what do you think makes great technical communication content on the web?
Well, great TechCom content really just follows great content. So writers need to stop thinking about writing books and start thinking about how people see stuff on the web. So being brief is important because long paragraphs, long pages won't be read. Lots of media is important. Use the tools you have. Screenshots are important. Video is important. Navigation elements such as expanding text and pop-ups are always work, just as long as you don't overuse them. And one thing that people always overlook is when you're creating content for the web, you really need to worry about how wide that gets displayed. It sounds kind of nitpicky, but just think about those big wide screens you have now, and a paragraph that goes an unlimited width, maybe a 2, 3, 4 sentence paragraph, but it's going to look like one line on your screen. There's actually studies out there that show that contributes to reader fatigue and people stop reading. So great content for the web, and especially great TechCom content for the web, is content that's easily read without getting tired, because a lot of times you really need to think about it while you're reading it. And you're not reading a comic, you're reading something you're trying to learn. And then the flavor of the day is also responsive content. So you really need to worry about not how that content looks on one screen, but how it looks on a screen all the way from an iPhone up to your huge 27-inch iMac. So that's the challenge of the day, and that's generally the rules that I would tell anybody getting started creating content on the web. And then as you start, different facets come into the picture.
Okay, good. Anybody want to add to that?
Well, I think I have some other things I'm going to say are responsive a little later on, so I'm going to say them. But it's all about being prepared for whatever device people are using. We can't just assume they're going to be on a desktop, and we also can't assume they're going to be on a mobile device. We have to just cover the whole gamut.
And the other thing I'd like to add is a lot of people think putting a link to a PDF is creating web content, and it's not. So I would always. What's that? What'd you say?
Said Lord knows, I see an awful lot of that still, and I find it kind of surprising that with as many tools that are out there to create more engaging content, how many folks will stick with, okay, here's a PDF that you can download and learn more about it. There's nothing wrong with it, but it doesn't, if I'm certainly not going to download a PDF to my mobile phone, so.
Exactly. And when people look on the web, they really want to click a link and get something very topical. And if it doesn't answer their question, they're more than willing to go find another topic. They just don't want to read one big long document. And maybe it's just sometimes because they're on the phone. Other times it's just because that's just the mindset people have when they're looking at a computer.
Yeah. Okay.
So we're talking about what's the ideal setup and why. What would be the best, but we wouldn't have a show and we wouldn't have this conversation if all of the content out there was in that style. Why do you think there is so much content out there that is bad, that isn't, it's PDFs and you can look at that, and talk through your thinking on why so much of it out there isn't the way it should be?
Well, documentation usually is an afterthought for a lot of companies. They're focused on their deliverables like software and so forth, and not so much on the documentation. So they invest their time in other areas. So that is, one of the bigger contributing factors. It's really hard to maintain your documentation, keep it up to date with the products and so forth. So time and money and resources are often very short for the contributors, and they don't necessarily have the time to put in to make good documentation. So there's a lot of contributing factors as to why that can happen. It's also really hard for writers to prove to management and so forth why they need to have good documentation, what's the return on that investment. And a lot of writers have a hard time explaining that to management. So, so for all these reasons and more, that's why there's a lot of bad documentation out there.
Yeah, and also it's what I alluded to before. A lot of people in the top floor know that there's a manual, a PDF manual maybe, and they say put that on the web. But that's not good content. That's not even really good documentation. It's not findable. It's not navigable. So that's a big reason why there's a lot of bad documentation out there. And also a lot of writers are great writers, but they're not designers. They may throw a screenshot in there and not realize it takes up the whole screen, or not realize it's blurry. So you really have to think about design and layout when you think about good communication, not only for the web but for everything. And that's a big reason why there's a lot of bad documentation out there, is because it's on the writer often to format their content for the media, and they just don't know how to do it because they're just, I don't want to say just a writer, but writing is their core skill, not design and development.
So what can, be that as it may, what can authors do to kind of help? Yeah, they're not going to be able to get a whole lot more resources, but what can they do to help improve it? Just some tips.
Well, I mean, the first tip is kind of a shameless plug, but there's tools out there that do it for them. But anyway, it doesn't hurt to learn how style sheets work, how what web layout works, how print works, how fonts contribute to readability. All those things may sound scary, especially when you start talking about style sheets and HTML. But those concepts really aren't that bad, and there's plenty of resources out there on the web to learn them for free. And even though there are tools out there like Doc2Help, it helps to know those things going into it, because you understand what Doc2Help is doing and you understand how to customize the things that it does. So I would recommend to any writer just to learn those very, very basic design and layout skills.
Gotcha. So to be able to learn those, or to be able to get tools such as Doc2Help, what are some benefits that they can, the writers can argue to their bosses to get the allocation of time to do some of the training, and to purchase some of the tools like yours? What are some of the good reasons to do that?
Well, since Nikki's been writing for just about everything we touch, she probably has some experience to lend here.
Well, I will say one thing it does is it saves you a lot of time, because you can start authoring, and Doc2Help automatically does a lot of work for you, like creates a table of contents, can add index entries, things like that. So you could sort of write out of the box, especially if you have existing content, get something out there, and you can make a lot of different outputs. And the other thing, as Dan talked about, is you're going to get, since we have built-in templates and style sheets, you're going to get a very nice looking output right out of the box for whatever you pick, be it, good old compiled HTML help, chunk files, or our net help, which, as Dan said, web help, a manual. Since we have this stuff built in, you're going to get good looking stuff out of the box, and then it's up to you. Do you want to do a lot more customization, or you could leave it as it is?
Yeah, so as far as selling the time and resource and budget allocation just for general skills, managers have to really look at the customer satisfaction aspect of this, because as I was talking about before, when something's not readable, somebody abandons it, or when something's not navigable, they can't find what they want, or if something's not searchable, they can't find what they want. So they may go to the documentation, whether it's on their desktop or online or wherever, not find an answer, and then call support, and then support has to track down the answer, and they're spending all this time. The time wasted there might be far more than the time wasted, not wasted, time spent learning these skills or buying these tools, and it just gives your company a better face when something looks very professional and information's easy to find. People know that you know what you're doing. When you put something out there that's not readable, not navigable, not findable, people start to question you. We know this from experience here at Component One. We have so many products, and we grew from a very small company. And there were times when our documentation wasn't as good as it should be, and we got a lot of complaints from customers. As a matter of fact, documentation is one of the biggest support/feedback subjects that we have across the whole company. I mean, it's something we really have to treat as part of our product.
And that seems like it would be, you know, an essential thing to start thinking about. I know some of the teams that I've worked with over the last few years seem to start to get that idea, but that, you know, you really, if you want to make sure that the documentation is truly part of the product, it's not. It's not something you can do overnight, and it's not something that it's going to take quite a bit of time to convince them, because you have to be involved throughout that development process to understand really what that product is about and how the documentation, the technical content around it supports what it does. And when you're dealing with this lovely multi-device world that we have right now, I was just thinking about it, and I'm looking here at my desktop, and I have 3 laptops, a smartphone, and a tablet all sitting here, and I'm like, you know, if I've got to write content that's going to look okay on all of those, and plus my 27-inch monitor and everything else, it is tough to do that in a way that allows it to show its best on any of those devices. So, what do you know? What plan? What approach can you take to ensure that the right content is going to get to the user, whatever it is that they want, whatever content they're looking for, on the device that they're currently using or may switch to at some point in the not too distant future?
So we've evolved here. So back in the 90s, the early 90s, people had an RTF or a Word document, and then they had a chum file, and that was the way they did multimedia help. I mean, they would print the document, and the chum file would show up on the desktop, and things were easy. So that was great. And then that was the birth of single sourcing. So then single sourcing got complex. We started creating all kinds of help files. We started creating print. We started creating PDF for online. All this from one project. So, you know, kind of gloss over that subject, but, you know, what we're talking about is single sourcing, having one project and creating all these different outputs. So for the longest time, for 10, 15 years, we've been doing single sourcing, and we thought about the devices. They were pretty finite. We had a screen, we had a website, and we had a printed manual, and that was our single sourcing. Well, very quickly in the last few years, screens have gone from 3 inches all the way up to 27 inches and bigger, and it is nearly impossible to single source, to create one output for each thing. Even when screens were just an iPhone and a desktop, we could have a special version of help for an iPhone and a special version for the help for desktop, and people still do that a lot, actually. But what I'm getting at is these days there's so many different size screens with tablets, different size phones. I mean, look at my phone; it looks like a tablet. And so I can't just say put phone help on there because it's going to look weird. So along comes a concept called responsive design. And responsive design is a concept that's been around for a few years, but it's really becoming the flavor of the day in the web. It's actually, you kind of have to do it on the web. What happens is the style sheet is smart enough to know the screenshot size, and it relays out the content for you. So, so the way to deliver content to specific devices is not to deliver content to specific devices. It's to use the responsive design concept so that the content knows how to adjust itself on the specific device. But to add one more layer to that, you also still need to think about people who need offline help, who need embedded help, who need a PDF or need printed manuals. So single sourcing still exists. There's just that extra layer with the web-based help and responsive design. So that was a bit of a brain dump. So I hope there's some cohesion there.
So when you're thinking about responsive design and using the style sheets that are available to you, can you do responsive design? This is a follow-up question. It's not one of the 5, by the way. Can you do responsive design if you don't necessarily know HTML or HTML5 in particular, which seems to be designed for that?
Going from if you're just creating content when you're running from scratch with no help meaning tools, you cannot do it with no knowledge of HTML or CSS. It is, I wouldn't say it's an advanced CSS concept, but it's at least intermediate. And Nikki's done a lot of research on the issue. That's what she usually speaks about, so she may have something to add.
But, okay. Yeah, well, I mean, that what Dan says, my something to add is what Dan says is absolutely true. If you do need knowledge. There's not really, I think, much of a reason to do it from scratch when you have something like, sorry, a shameless plug here, Doc2Help, that will create these great responsive outputs for you, and the CSSs are there. Of course, responsive means you have one set of HTML, so like Dan said, one set of content. It's the CSSs that adjust everything according to the device size, usually the width. So I'm using my hands a lot. Sorry, I'm very Italian. I can't stop. I just, but yeah, I think a tool is absolutely the way to go for technical writers. We were talking earlier. Shawnee was mentioning about how we're constrained for time, we're constrained for resources. Why write all that stuff from scratch? Just use a tool that gives you a great looking output from the get-go. And
just to clarify, responsive design is done just about entirely in CSS. So what it does is it takes HTML and just lays it out differently according to screen size. So with this concept of responsive design, it's even more important to separate content from formatting, and that's what the big mantra always is in tech writing, is separate content from formatting, but now it's really, really important.
Okay, so jumping off on that, I have a question. So should the authors who are going through this, the responsive design will be able to clean up the screens when they get smaller and add more when they get larger, but what about context? From the content point of view, when you're considering responsive design, how does that play in?
Well, so context meaning like the user's context when they're accessing your content, right?
Correct. If I'm on a mobile phone, the context of me choosing to use this help on a mobile phone versus choosing to do it on a tablet or on my desktop.
Right. Well, I think Dan said one of TechCom's mantras just a second ago. Well, the second one is know your audience. So context is all part of that. You always have to be thinking about the context of the user when you're developing something. And that's what's really great about responsive, is that we can just know that what we're putting out there is going to work for them. And because we can't assume anymore, I mean, there's always been, oh, I'm developing help for a desktop application. Obviously, they're only going to be looking at the help on the desktop. That's not really true. Google did now this isn't a study specifically about people's online help use, but Google did a study and found that 90% of us use mobile and desktop devices sequentially to do basically the same thing. Say you're making flight arrangements or something like that. You're doing 90% of us sequentially, so we go from one device to another. 66% of us will use them simultaneously. So it's just as likely that someone could be working on your desktop app and then looking at your help on their tablet or their mobile device. You really can't assume anymore. And people could be at lunch and having an argument about how to do something or trying to figure something out. So they don't have to be sitting at the desktop using your tool. They might be reading the information or the content when they're at lunch. So I think the answer to should we consider context? Yes, and we should probably consider that we can never exactly pin down what they're doing unless they're people that are they're locked in a room with a manual, then you know they need a manual. But everybody else, it's free form.
So I just was organizing my thoughts there. Sorry. Anyway, so in the web world, these days, the whole trend is to design mobile first, because that's the hardest thing. That's the lowest common denominator. So you start thinking about how something's designed on mobile, and then you make it work for bigger formats. That's kind of a backwards way of thinking that we're used to. We're always used to thinking for designing for big screens and then hoping it works for mobile. But these days it's mobile first. But having said that, you really should know your customers, because there are cases where maybe 10% of your customers need to see it on mobile, or maybe nobody needs to see it on mobile. And then your job becomes easier, and also everybody's looking at your content that you designed mobile first on a big screen, and it looks maybe not exactly right. So the best thing to do is really get to know your customers, do surveys. Personally, in the DocTelp world, I keep a handful of customers in my pocket that I can always go to and bounce things off of, interview them. If you do trade shows, have a focus group. I went to a Microsoft focus group at a trade show once, and it was great. They paid each person $50 just to come into a room to give them some knowledge, and they probably got a lot more than $50 worth of value out of that. So while we preach responsive design, it's really, really important to keep in mind that maybe it's not important for you. Maybe you don't need to design for mobile devices, or you don't need to produce something that's for an e-reader or something. Maybe everybody's just looking on the desktop. Maybe everybody wants a PDF. So it's important to keep in mind while we preach all these modern techniques.
Well, and I will say, it's as much as PDFs got a little bit of they get a little bit of bad. They're getting a bad reputation. People are saying, "Oh, you put PDF on the web," but a lot of people still like to get PDFs, and often having them available for a certain sector of your audience to download, because they actually want to print it out and look at it, is something that you need to do sometimes. And
then the other resource I'll talk about is your support team. Don't ever forget that they're there. They're one of the most valuable resources of information. You probably have a sales team too, but they're not as valuable as a support team, because salespeople see things through sales glasses. But your support team will give you a lot of great feedback, and Shawnee could probably speak to that a little bit, because she's been a support and she does some of DocTelp support now.
Yeah, well, knowing your audience is knowing your customers, and one of the best ways to know your customers is to do support for them. So it is a great resource for sure.
So as a punch list, if I was the writer and I said, oh, okay, well, I get this information to be able to put things in context, to be able to understand the right type of responsive design and all these things. Support teams, the supports group, the product manager, where else do I get this information? Those two people, marketing as well? Give me a punch list on where I go first, second, and third.
Well, the first place to go is the easiest place, and that's the support team, because they're there. They're in your company. They'll respond, and they have to respond. It's their job. But and they talk to more customers than anybody. The second place to go is product management, because it's their job to reach out. And then product managers will have their own punch list depending on your industry and how you do things. A lot of times a conference is the best way to go learn things. If you don't have that resource where you have marketing or product management that goes to conferences, join a local user group. Get information there. So local user groups that are in the area that you are in is also a great way to get feedback. So my punch list would be support, product management, /marketing, and local user groups is probably the best. And also, actually, another easy one is online forums. You can always find great opinions on online forums.
Sort of like that TechWhirl forum or something, right?
Exactly.
Shameless plug.
Or DocTelp forum.
They set us up for one.
Yeah, one for you.
But you always have to be careful with forums, because you don't know exactly who you're getting the opinions from. But it's still a good place to get opinions. And
there's no reason the DocBook shouldn't be talking to the customers also. Probably coordinating with product management and talking to identifying the people you want to talk to. But we should be checking out our angle on that also, so that we know what the customers are thinking about our docs and what they want. And yeah, I think support is a great resource, because they'll tell you what people are asking you. When you get a a number of the same questions coming up all the time, that's your cue to figure out a way how to surface that more in the documentation. Does it need a video? Does it need its own specific piece of content? That sort of thing.
To add to the punch list, another thing that I would add to that list is if you do have web-based help, you can get usage statistics. You'll be able to see where your customers are going to, what page they visit the most frequently, and so forth. That information hopefully will be at your fingertips, so you can pull that information down and know maybe you need to improve something that they're going to often in the help documentation.
Sure. And with Dr. Help, you could add Google Analytics to your, and that help.
So we keep adding to this punch list on the fly here, so it's going to become long. and I kind of understood sales participation here. I mean, you could get good information from sales too. You're not going to get a whole lot of information about documentation. You'll get some feedback about product though. But basically, just go talk to anybody who touches customers and find out what the behaviors are. And don't forget about things like SurveyMonkey, because you can send out surveys. I would take those with a grain of salt, because I don't know if people actually take time answering them, but that's another good way to get information.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah, it's a good little list, and I know Jill's been typing, so we'll have it. It also seems like, Connie, I think this might be a good template. As we're doing all the templates of potential questions to ask and ways to explore this to at least give people a guide. It's not that any of us don't know that, but sometimes it's helpful to have a little bit of a guide as we're going in.
Yeah. I think that's true. I mean, it leads very nicely to my next question, because one of the things that I have found over my way too many years, I'm not going to tell you how many years in the business, is figuring out how to plan this. How do you? There have frequently been a lot of challenges with just getting the information from the development team enough in advance, et cetera, to be able to start planning traditional style documentation, much less responsive documentation or multimedia content and that sort of thing. So in your experience with your customers or the folks that you talk to at conferences and whatnot, what does the planning look like when you're looking at developing your technical content for it with a responsive design framework versus a more static or traditional documentation design?
Okay, well, I am actually in the middle right now of taking Dr. Health's project, which was built as a traditional project, and transforming it into being responsive first, being able to work well on responsive, which, as Dan mentioned earlier, the whole web principle of mobile first works for documentation also. And there are a lot of things you need to think about. It's very doable if you keep a few things in mind when you're doing it. Number one is you're probably going to need to get down to, when you're planning, think about getting down to maybe 2 levels. People can't see all of the relationships between levels when they're on a smaller device. So you have to think about, some of us have documentation that will be 3 or 4 levels deep on topics. You want to think about that structure. You need to think about tables. A lot of us have really wide tables with a lot of columns. Do you want to get rid of those tables? Do you want to refactor them in some way? Or can your tool handle reflowing your tables on mobile devices? That is, sorry, shameless plug number 27. That's something Dr. Help will do. There's a setting in our responsive output where you can say reflow the table. So that's one less thing to worry about. You want to write concisely, as Dan said, absolutely users, whether on a desktop or on a smaller device, they do get fatigue. Image files are an issue on mobile devices. They've done studies and found that 74% of people will abandon a content that doesn't load within 5 seconds, and it didn't load within 5 seconds because of some image file issues. So you need to think about that. One thing that's really cool about some technologies we've had in online help for a long time is progressive information disclosure is really important to use when you're doing responsive, because people are going to be on a smaller device. They're going to want to expand more information if they want it, and not expand it if they don't want it. So progressive information disclosure takes another leap on responsive. And there are a lot of things like expanding collapsing text. There's some dynamic HTML stuff we've had for a long time you could still use. Expanding collapsing text, inline text, pop-ups, things like that. And I think those are some of the biggies. I do have an article coming out in the May issue of TechWhirl magazine about responsive design, where I have a lot of these tips, and also in the March Intercom magazine from STC. So if anybody who's not writing all this down, take a look at those.
So a couple of things to add. First of all, sorry for the train.
Yeah.
There's a train track right by our office, and it sounds like another one may be coming, so I apologize for that.
You're not the only company that has that. There's a different company we talked to that had the same problem. I think it was EasyData. What is it about TechCom companies that are in this position?
We're on the right side of the track.
So go on. Sorry, I just realized it's like the second company that has the train tracks right by.
But anyway, the other thing is, Nikki alluded to this, keeping things to 2 levels of navigation. In modern web design, scrolling is a good thing. We keep going back and forth. People used to hate scrolling. If it doesn't fit on a screen, create a link, create a page. Now scrolling is a good thing. So don't be afraid to have a super long page, as long as the headings are well organized and as long as there's in-page navigation as well. So, you know, instead of clicking going to another page, just click and go to another part of the same page. And we have the same challenges, I guess, when we redesign websites here at the company. If you've seen the new DocTelp site, that's not a plug, it's just an example. If you see the new DocTelp site, the pages are actually quite long. But there's controls in the page where you can jump around the page, but it took us quite some time to sell it to management because they're like, I don't want to scroll. Well, scrolling's bad, everything needs to be above the fold, but that's just not the case anymore. People are used to doing this. And there are touch screens on desktop PCs as well. As a matter of fact, we're using one as we speak. So that's just a very big, another mantra to keep in mind is scrolling is not a bad thing anymore.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and think about how, like, a good responsive design, you do not move horizontally. You're always moving vertically. And think of how annoying it is when you're on a mobile device and the site is not responsive and you have to move. You have to swipe over horizontally and you have to pinch and do all these things to read the content. It's very annoying, and I mean, this is just my opinion. I will often leave sites like that. I'll just say it's too annoying. But when you have a good responsive design, it's very easy to read, and you're not doing all this pinching, and you're not doing all horizontal and vertical scrolling. So it's really the way to go. People are going to just keep editing sites like that.
Yeah.
Very nice. And I guess the argument is, you know, because it always kind of needs to go back to if somebody's taking notes, and we have a number of people that have hung with us throughout the 45 minutes, is they're trying to figure out how to either do this because they have all the tools and the funding and the time, or they're trying to win the argument with management to go this direction. So, you know, it seems like inevitably this draws back to trying to create that great customer experience and how it's going to impact the bottom line, right? And if you get frustrated on the docs and you're unable to really understand the product, how likely are you to buy it again, you know, or to move on? So, you know, very, very good stuff. So we're out of these are the 5, and we have some additional questions because we do have about 15 minutes left. So we've talked a lot about creating content, and we've talked a lot about structuring content. But what about hosting the content and actually getting it onto the various devices? Dan, do you have any ideas on this particular idea?
Well, it so happens that I do. So anyway, we'll stick to the web content thing because that's the subject. I mean, there's all kinds of outputs you can deliver web-based, Windows-based help with your application. But let's just stick to the web for now. So when you're deploying web content or web-based help or net help or whatever it is, there's a few different ways you can go. You could ship it with a product and have a user look at it on their local machine, but that doesn't seem to make sense because you're looking at it in a browser, it's loading it on the machine, you have no way to keep that up to date, and a lot of times it's hard to look at things that contain JavaScript on a local device because IE tries to block it. But there are companies that do that. They will ship a web-based help on a local to be installed on a local machine, so that is an option. You just pack it up in a folder and ship it right off with your software or whatever you're delivering and have the user open on their local machine. That's not the recommended option, but that is an option. Another way you can do it is simply put it on your web server. So most of these web help systems that we and other vendors create are simple enough that you could just put the folder right on a web server, open the default file, and people can look at it. A lot of times that you can run into problems doing that because IT may not let you into the web server. They may not want to put it on there for you. They may not have provision for it. They may be scared about security. So all those are risks, but it's really not that hard to do. And then the third option is to host it in the cloud. So there are plenty of services out there like Amazon Web Services and Microsoft Azure and other hosting services where you can install it yourself in the cloud. But we also, oh, here comes a big plug, but also an announcement. So we are launching our own cloud service. It's called Nest. So you get the OWL and the Nest connection. So we're launching sorry, I got tongue-tied. We're launching a service called Nest, and what it is you can upload your NetHelp files straight from Doc2Help into Nest, which is a cloud service, and it will automatically be on the website at the URL that you set up. So it's not going to be dochelp.com/yourdocumentation. It's going to be your website/yourdocumentation. But all you'll have to do is have an account on Nest, upload your NetHelp there, and aside from it being hosted, you'll get feedback and rating, user login, feedback and rating, and also analytics reports. So you'll be able to see who's searching for what, who's looking at what topics, who searched for something and didn't find an answer. So it'll be a great way for you to keep your help up to date. And you can also upload it as many times as you want, so you can release as many versions as you want. So anyway, Nest is going to be free. It's not available yet, but we are releasing a beta. We plan to unveil the beta around the time the SEC Summit starts, which is the 18th of May. And we're going to sign up a limited amount of beta folks and make sure that everything works right, and then we're going to release it to the public. But the important thing to note is that it will be free. This version will be free, and we will always have a free version. So if anybody has reservations about going to the web but don't have a place well, if they have reservations because they don't have a place to host, we have a free home for those projects now. But the only stipulation is it will only accept a Doc2Help output.
Thanks. And if they wanted to, and folks, I know Connie, we have a press release going out today on it.
I believe so, yeah.
And then if folks who've heard about this for the first time wanted to learn more, where would they do that?
About Nest, they should contact Shawnee at her email address, which I don't think we have a way to share that, but we can as a follow-up.
And a simpler answer is just if you come to the Contact Us page for TechWhirl, or I assume the contact page for Doc2Help, and drop a note there. If you come to us, we'll grab it and send it on to the Doc2Help team as well. We're not going to post Shawnee's email address publicly. The tens of people reading us will probably get to send you all sorts of amazing offers that you're probably not going to be overly interested in. But okay, so they're definitely going to learn more and be able to see the beta coming out at the SDC Summit. Very cool.
Yeah, so yeah, we don't have anything to show right now, so we're still polishing it up, but we will unveil it at the SDC show. And just right now, Shawnee's just collecting a group of people who are interested.
And integrated with Doc2Help, so there'll be I assume some button that, this is off script here, but some button that allows you to just sort of publish right from the Word doc right into the cloud? Or how will that integration work?
Yeah, basically, and not just Word, by the way. Remember, we have an editor too.
Gotcha.
There's just a big misconception. Everybody thinks Doc2Help is Word only. It's our own fault. It's called Doc2Help but anyway, no, you'll create the NetHelp output and then push a button to upload it to Nest.
Right on. Very cool. Connie, do you want to jump in? We have about 10 minutes here, but you want to jump in and we had about 3 general questions asked from folks who had signed up early. We had a lot more than that, but they were very much Doc2Help specific questions, and we're going to do our best to work with the team to address those questions offline. But Connie, do you want to do the first general question?
Sure. One of our audience participants wrote in and asked, we've got Chim's installed with the product. We are considering moving all of the help to the web, but I'm worried about context-sensitive topics already. While we're still in the planning stage, is there anything else that we should take into account?
Well, you can use context-sensitive help on the web as well. As a matter of fact, it's kind of easier than it is on Windows or in whatever platform you're developing for. So even with Doc2Help, I mean, I know this is not a Doc2Help question, but most other tools do the same thing, is they will still handle context-sensitive help for web content just the same as they will any other platform. And even if you're just developing HTML files alone, context sensitivity is still very possible because each of those topics have a unique URL, and that's all you have to use.
Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to talk about people being offline, but is that what you were going to talk about?
but I was about to say that. But the question was, what other things that should we be concerned with? And I think Nikki was about to actually answer that. So go ahead.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, the only other thing, because, if you have map IDs that are working between your chunk file and your application, those map IDs are still going to work for web-based help, and, we call it NetHelp. The other consideration you have is that what if you want to account for the fact that users could be offline, which means they hit the help button and they're going to get nothing. They're going to get a browser's going to open and say, you're not connected. So the other thing you might want to take into account is the developers for your application. You might want to have the option for people to access the help offline and then also install help with the application so that if people choose to work offline, they could get to those topics. But that's going to be part of knowing your audience and knowing whether that's necessary.
And that's one of those instances where you may want to install a copy of the web-based help locally because you need to offer the offline option. It's just the user needs to know they may not see the most up-to-date help because it was installed with the product. But that's probably the biggest consideration that you need to consider when moving to web-based help is what you do with offline people.
Gotcha. All right, so I think this will be our final question here, and we got about 5 minutes left. Final question here is loan writers and consultants. The resources and some of the stuff you've talked about, how can they best apply these? What are some of the things that folks who don't, are kind of being hired in or kind of out there working, what are some of the stuff they can do for either creating the great content or giving guidance?
For getting guidance? Is that what you said?
As a consultant, or as how can they best apply these resources? The best way I would say to get started on getting guidance is just to go to the web. There is plenty of information on the web for free, and then you have other things like Lydia.com, Linda. I always forgot already. that have great tutorials on these types of information. But
but never hesitate to go to the web to find free stuff. It's amazing what you can find.
Very nice. Nikki, are there any organizations where people could possibly do networking and learn things about their trade?
I think the Society for Technical Communication, stc.org, is a fine organization to look into to learn more about technical communication. Not only networking, but we have a lot of resources on our website. We have, if you join, there are quite a few, I think it's at least 100, don't quote me on that, recorded webinars you could go back and look at. You get access to all the content in Intercom Magazine and our Technical Communication Journal. So there are a lot of resources there when you join STC. And of course there is, if you come to the summit or any of the local meetings, there is the in-person networking. But we have a LinkedIn page and a few other places people can network virtually, which of course is very popular too.
Well, there's also a great website called TechWhirl.com, don't forget.
You took my slow-pitch softball.
Took me a while to swing at it.
I might as well just throw one to my partner here. So.
Yep, you can come to TechWhirl.com. We provide a vast number of resources for folks who are trying to either learn about some aspect that they're not familiar with, thinking about it as a career option, wanting to see what kind of tools are available and how to pick the right one for their particular situation. And in addition to the fact that you can also easily participate in the free of charge community forums that are so graciously sponsored by Doc2Help, where there are a ton of people who've been around for many years to just graduated last week who are asking and answering questions about the best ways and some different approaches and best practices on how to produce great technical content, whether that's for the web or for other formats, more traditional formats.
All right. Well, we are just looking at the clock. We're just about out of time, so we're going to wind down. We hope that we've done our best to answer the questions that you submitted and some of the larger questions about creating great content, from the context of it to the structure and some of the tools. If you, by some chance, you have some more questions for the Doc2Help team or us, you can, that contact us page is on TechWhirl.com. We do have our email list, the online forums. There's more than enough ways to reach out. I know that Doc2Help also has the same stuff, including us being all on Twitter and Facebook and various things. So please reach out. We will do our best to answer your questions. The other thing is we do encourage, if you're in the process of evaluating tools, yeah, we've talked a lot. The Doc2Help team is one of our partners. We don't partner with everybody. We try to find the best products out there to work with and promote to the folks who do come to our sites. We really encourage you to take a look at Doc2Help as well as their new Nest tool as it comes out. There's a 30-day free trial, the all-in-one, and yeah, it's an all-in-one solution for creating, managing, publishing information for desktop, help, the web, ebooks, and print. So we do definitely give you give it a try and see what you think. It's the folks that we've talked to who use it think very highly of it. So we would recommend at least giving it a shot. Dan, Nikki, Shawnee, thank you so much for answering our questions and for spending a little time with us.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Jill Parman for her copious notes and taking time out of her busy day to help us as well. For Connie and myself and everyone at TechWhirl, thank you for watching and have a great day.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.